Okay, today we're going to talk about The Big Catch and why it's one of my most anticipated games of 2025. If you're not familiar with the title, The Big Catch launched as a Kickstarter project in 2022 and was backed and ultimately funded. One of the rewards for kickstarting the game was supposed to be an exclusive demo of sorts, but the developers decided to make it free for everyone with the promise of something new for backers. So that's what we have here. The Big Catch Tackle Box is a slice of what to expect from the final game and is free to download if you have a PC and are on Steam. So, what exactly is the Big Catch? From their Kickstarter page, they wrote, "The Big Catch evokes fifth generation platformers, but the games we pull inspiration from aren't bound by generation or genre. When looking to make The Big Catch the best it can be, we turn to the games we're passionate about due to their exceptional craft in terms of art, design, and fun." Some of these titles include Mario platformers like Sunshine and Odyssey, Zelda games like the Wind Waker and Majora's Mask, Ape Escape, which is one of my personal favorite franchises, Rayman 2, Shadow of the Colossus, even Fez, Chibi Robo, and Psychonauts. So, as of last year, during one of the summer game showcases, the Filet Group revealed the game with a new trailer and publishing partner announcement. Xseed and Marvelous will be publishing the game hopefully in 2025. And while The Big Catch was supposed to release on PC and Steam first with their new publishing partner now, I can't imagine it won't find its way to other platforms. I played through the Tackle Box last year to 100% completion. It took me about 9 hours to complete. There's a lot in this demo here. I unfortunately did not get the opportunity to back the game. I wasn't even aware of the project until after the fact. So I'm pretty fortunate and appreciative that I got a chance to play this game alongside everyone else. But today we're specifically going to talk about how the game feels to play, what some of my hopes are and expectations are for the final release, and how the Big Catch compares to the games that came before it and some of its contemporaries today. So let's jump in. Game has a really nice load screen with that sort of fishing bob lure bouncing in the water. So this is pretty much the only cutscene or cinematic in the entire demo. The game has you starting sort of wandering a desert, completely famished and dehydrated. And then you sort of arrive at this tutorial pond area, and that's where the game starts. Okay, so how do the controls and character movement in the Big Catch compare to the 3D platformers that came before it, and how does it really hold up to some of its contemporaries? When it comes to making or analyzing a 3D platformer, I think it's probably impossible not to look back on Super Mario 64 as a sort of baseline in terms of character movement and just overall game feel. If you were a 90s kid growing up, you might remember that N64 launch tape you could receive in the mail where the system's shown off and Ken Lobb demonstrates the controls in Super Mario 64.
Hey guys, how you doing? So, I understand you're here to find out about the Nintendo 64. Nintendo 64, we call it that because it happens to be the world's first 64-bit hardware. Now, I could go on and on about all the technical stuff, but I think it's easier for me to explain that as I show you the game.
Hello!
Let me jump into the game. You notice that Mario's standing in this huge field outside of a big castle. Now, if I take the control stick and I just move it a little bit, you notice that Mario starts to tiptoe. I moved a little bit farther, Mario starts this kind of slow walk. Crank it and he goes full out sprint. Whip it in circles. Full 360-degree control.
360.
Alright, so nothing's really changed, and the Super Mario 64 fundamentals have sort of been applied here too. So if you just push ever so slightly on the left analog stick, Castor, the main character, will start to sort of tiptoe around the environment. If you apply a little bit more pressure, they'll start to jog. And if you put full force on the left analog stick, they'll start sprinting and running around the environment. Now, if I had one minor critique, and it's pretty much my only complaint in the game, it's not really a big deal. I do think the sort of walking tiptoe animation looks a little strange. I'm not sure if it's just a case of having too many or it's low frames or what the deal is, but it's just a little weird looking, a little stiff. It doesn't ultimately take too much away from the game when you're kind of running around and dashing around the environment. You don't really notice it. It doesn't really change the way the game plays. But it's in the grand scheme of things, it's just a very minor critique that they may have already addressed for the final release, or maybe it's something they'll revisit as they continue to work on the game. But that's pretty much my only sort of complaint in terms of character animation, just the way it feels to, and the way it looks, more importantly, when you're running around as the character. So Caster can also perform neutral jumps or hops just by simply pressing the X button. The harder you press down on the button, however, the higher the jump. This also applies to the tight ropes and nets you can jump on later in the demo, so we haven't seen that yet. If you've noticed, there's a sort of a stretchiness to the animation as he lands, where his knees sort of jut out and extend. I think Jak and Daxter on the PlayStation 2 had this sort of elasticity to the character animations, which I really liked. While Jak didn't have a particularly complicated moveset, they sort of made up for it with their smooth animations. It also just felt really nice to do the long jumps in that game, for example. I also look back on Banjo-Kazooie rather fondly. While it's yet another game with a relatively simple control scheme, it just feels good to perform the Talon Trot ability to get around quickly, or running into a crouching, what they call flap flip jump to reach higher platforms. Okay, so you can crouch in this game. If you hold R2, you'll go into this sort of crouching position. If you twirl the left analog stick around, you'll spin in this sort of locked position, and Caster starts sort of looking around. If you press square while you're crouched, you'll do a slide. There's a nice vibration on this when you do this. If you crouch, hit square, and then X before the end of the slide animation, you'll do a sort of long sliding jump. So hit square, then X. And it's kind of similar to the rolling long jump in Jak and Daxter. Building up speed and momentum is a huge part of this game. There are a few places in the demo where they will ask you to run down slopes to kind of build up speed to reach platforms that are out of reach. So if you jump down and start running down a hill, you'll pick up speed. You can even link this into a slide. So if you're running down a hill and then hold R2, once you pick up speed, you'll go into the sliding animation. And then naturally, you can kind of link that into the sliding long jump. Just like in Super Mario 64, you have the R2 butt stomp. So if you jump in the air and hit R2, you'll do a stomp on the ground. You have a nice little landing animation there. Pretty much all 3D platformers post Super Mario 64 have had some sort of butt stomp or slam technique. You can actually use this on slopes to build up even more speed. So if you just jump into a slope, hit R2, you'll instantly go into a slide. I don't know if it's really any faster than running down a hill, but it does feel good when you do it. Another technique made its way from Super Mario 64 into this game, and it's the sideways somersault flip kick. So if you're holding the left analog stick in any direction, and then you snap it back in the opposite direction and jump, you'll do a sideways somersault. And you can do this from any direction. Feels good and looks really nice. I'm not sure if the slam, slide, and somersault really have any practical use in this demo. I don't think there's anything here that asks you to use any of those techniques. They just feel like sort of stylistic flourishes and they're really nice animations, obviously, and it sort of brings more sort of depth to the character's moveset. But there's nothing really in the demo that makes you slide under like a crevice, for example. I don't think there's really any need to use the butt slam unless you're trying to pick up speed down a slope, which there might be opportunities for that. I can't remember from the last time I played it. But the sideways somersault kickflip as well, like that's just there, I think, for having an additional move. But it doesn't really serve any practical use in the demo other than looking cool and feeling good. So I do wonder how the final game is going to incorporate those techniques, if they're just going to be there for sort of, again, bringing more sort of layers and depth to the character moveset, or if they're going to be required to traverse and platform and solve sort of platforming sequences later on. But that's all yet to be seen. Caster can also swing their fishing rod. You have a short little animation here. It's not technically a combo string or anything like that. You can do aerial swings as well. There are a few enemies in the demo. They take one hit to kill and they drop coins when you defeat them. But that's the extent of the combat. It's kind of, that's another sort of topic that's yet to be seen or yet to be discussed. It's just how combat heavy the final game's going to be. In one of the early trailers, Fling Group showed what appeared to be boss-like characters in a sort of traditional 3D Zelda game dungeon space. So whether there's going to be like mini bosses or stronger enemies that take more than one hit, that's kind of the big question. Whether or not your rod will also get upgraded. You just have one fishing rod in this demo, obviously, but will the rods become stronger if you upgrade them or purchase or find new fishing rods? Will the lures or bobbers at the end of the fishing rod, will they be customizable or upgradable? Maybe you'll get a spiked bobber that you can toss at enemies to attack them, or maybe even your fishing rod can reel in enemies, almost like a grapple arm that pulls enemies in closer, like ideas like that. Like there's a lot they can do with the combat in this game, but from the demo, it appears to be way more focused on just traversal and platforming and collecting. So the combat portion of the game is a big question mark at the moment. One of your last maneuvers that you can do is a spin jump. So if you just press X, and if you jump and start twirling the left analog stick either in a clockwise or counterclockwise motion, you can perform a spin. This is most useful from higher heights, as it kind of gives you some more control over your landing. Because otherwise you sort of drop like a rock if you just jump straight down from a high platform. You can buff the twirling spin move on the ground and jump, and you can even do it as you're falling to the surface. You can sort of like buff the input in and start spinning. That technique is actually used to get some of the more elusive, hard to reach coins later in the demo. I may or may not be showcasing that in this video, but do know that it is a slightly more advanced technique, and it's pretty tricky to pull off, or at least what the demo asks you to do with that technique. It's relatively challenging. So that is the basic moveset for the Big Catch. There are a few more techniques and objects you can interact with later on in this demo that I'll be talking about, but overall, it feels really good to run around and control. There's a lot of sort of nuance to the general moveset, and most importantly, it just feels super responsive and good to run around as this character. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about this demo space. So here we're in the Fiscari training grounds. You've got one of the first collectibles in the demo, which are these coins. There are, I believe, 696 coins to collect. I mentioned this earlier, but I completed this demo at 100% last year and collected and did everything it had to offer. I won't be doing that again for the purposes of this video, but do know there are a ton of coins to collect, and some of them are really well hidden and hard to find. We've got this sign here. Coins aren't merely beautiful relics, they sustain the tribe. Ultimately, what else is this all for? Pick them up. That's from Bale, who's our mentor. They're around here somewhere. All right. So over here, we've got a sort of playground of old 3D platformer ideas. If you've played any third-person action-adventure game or 3D platformer over the past decade or two, you've probably seen objects like this in environments. So let's check out the sign first. So climbing, leaping between, and mounting poles are considered novice skills any Feisker should master quickly. Likewise, tightrope walking is child's play, but that's no reason not to perfect your balance and bounce to new heights. So most of the platforming in this game is actually fairly manually driven. If you look back on games like, Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask, like the early 3D Zelda games, um, a lot of the platforming is automated. So like when you run to the edge of a platform, you kind of like automatically jump forward. Obviously, that's not the case here. But some of the objects in the environment in this game, they are kind of automated. So like if you jump into this pole, you just kind of immediately grab it and climb up it. And there's a nice kind of spiraling spin down animation when you go down the pole. And if you just climb right to the top, you sort of tiptoe on the top of the point of the pole, which is very Sly Cooper looking. You can jump from point to point, jump down onto the ropes below, and you'll automatically sort of land on the rope. And you can't fall off the ropes if you're just moving the left analog stick around. So this at least is pretty forgiving. The rest of the game, not so much. But similarly to the way how jumps perform and how they act, if you just kind of press X slightly and just tap it, you'll do like short little hops on the rope. But if you hold the button down, you'll do super high jumps. And you can kind of land and aim and jump around to other type ropes that are in the space. There's some coins to collect up here. So again, this is probably the most automated platforming in the game, but for good reason. I don't think I would want it any other way than how it's presented there. Again, you can just kind of automatically jump as long as you're facing the direction of the little points here. You just kind of immediately grab them. You can just spin in place until you jump off of them in the direction you're facing. So, pretty nice. Over here, you've got a sign that says, keep your head up, hanging from which are called fly rings, offers a path forward in precarious places. So these are fly rings. Again, you just jump into them and you automatically grab them. Pretty forgiving. You'll see these later in the demo. Up against the wall here and on the ceiling, you've got what I'd like to call the Rayman 2 textures. If you've played any version of Rayman 2, you've probably seen wall and ceiling textures like this. So this moss-like grass or vine sort of texture on these walls can be climbed. So you can just jump straight into them. You just start climbing them instantly. Same as you just go right onto the ceiling. I think, again, one thing that differentiates this game from other platformers of the past and even present day, everything's really fast and snappy. So you're not slowly sort of crawling up these vines like other games have done before. You can jump from patch to patch. As you can see, they're just kind of a square texture for now. Alright, over here. Honed Fiscari instincts can easily identify stable tether points to latch to. When in range, cast a rod and hold tight. Feeling stuck or lost, always remember to turn your gaze aloft. So these are classic sort of grapple hook points. So if you just tap R1, as long as you're within range, you'll instantly hook a line to the grapple point up there. And here you have full 360-degree movement.
360.
It's not just simply back and forth on the line that's hooked up there. So you can just twirl the left analog stick around in any direction. And the interesting thing about how these wires and lines work on these grapple points is that you really can't jump off of them. You actually have to let go of the hook line button. So in this case, if you build up momentum and speed, just say by going back and forth, you just let go of R1, and whatever direction you're facing, you'll get flung in that direction. So it's a little different from what the, I guess, quote unquote norm is in a lot of 3D platformers or third person action adventure games that have sort of, ropes that tether, Uncharted style or any other game that has done a mechanic like this. So I think that's really interesting, and it kind of opens up for some more creative and more challenging platforming sequences later, just based on the fact that you have to kind of manually position and look in the direction you want to swing and, let go at the right sort of height in the swing. So I'm going to swing right into this pole here, sort of Prince of Persia, Jack and Daxter style ball. I'm going to be mentioning these games a lot during this video. So again, you can go left and right on the pole. You can immediately kind of snap and turn around and position yourself in whatever direction you want to face. Again, everything's really fast and snappy. So if you just hold left on the analog stick forward, you'll start spinning. I'm gonna let go and grapple onto the line here. So again, it's very free movement, a lot of manual input here, which feels really good and extremely responsive. So this whole space, when I started to kind of play around in here for the first time, kind of solidified my opinion on the game that there was something kind of special here in terms of just game feel and the way the character controls and just how they interact with the environment. There's a lot of good stuff there. What 3D platformer from the PlayStation 2 sort of GameCube era would be complete if it didn't have grind rails? Again, you've got your like Ratchet and Clank, Sonic Adventure 2 style grind rails here. They work a little differently compared to other games in the genre, or the games that kind of came before this again. Ratchet and Clank is pretty forgiving in terms of the grind rails. It's fairly automated, again, which is what I would say about it. Here, you can actually just kind of like fling yourself off if you just hold forward and jump. So you have to be careful on the grind rails, especially when there's more than one kind of next to each other and you have to jump from left and right. It's, again, fairly manually driven, so you can kind of like lose your spot and kind of fling yourself off when you don't really want to. So very interesting. If you hold forward on the left analog stick, you can go faster on the rail. So again, just be careful with positioning. Here you've got some items and objects you can kind of reel in with your fishing rod. So I have these little like spiked urchins here, and I can lock on to these little balloons, toss my urchin, there's some coins. Of course, what 3D platformer wouldn't have swimming. But again, the swimming controls feel really nice, just really fast and smooth, and simple, most importantly. Momentum, as I mentioned earlier, is a big part of this game and building up speed. So to reach this ledge over here, for example, you just can't jump out of the water into the wall. Obviously, your jump's not high enough to begin with, but if you just jump into the wall, you'll kind of turn around and start sliding downwards. So if you go underwater, you have this boost. Just press square to swim faster or boost around. And you kind of have to use this to kind of boost yourself out of the water to get to that platform up there. And if you kind of jump into any platform that has a ledge, you'll automatically grab the ledge, which is really nice. So again, that's like one of the few automated sort of mechanics in the game. So this comes into play again in the demo way later. But one other pro tip in this GameFAQs pro tip in this spot, these balloons kind of spawn indefinitely, and there are a ton of coins hidden in them. So when I was trying to collect everything, many of the remaining coins that I wasn't able to find were kind of hidden in these balloons. So just keep throwing these urchins at the balloons until you kind of exhaust all of the coin drops. There are more than you would think here, so. But again, we're not going to do that today. And there's Bale. She's sleeping over there as we work our way through this tutorial space. Alright, so again, you just jump into a ledge, automatically grab it. And here we've arrived at the main collectible in the demo, which are the fish. Now, Any good 3D platformer has a primary collectible. Again, if you look back on Super Mario 64, you've got the Power Stars. In Jak and Daxter, you've got the Power Cells. And Banjo Kazooie, for example, you have the jigsaw pieces. So in this game, you have fish, and it's one of the few 3D platformers that have what I like to call like a living collectible. Ape Escape, again, as I mentioned earlier, was one of the developers' influences, and the monkeys in Ape Escape are obviously living collectibles, and they run around. They have their own AI patterns, and they kind of goof off in the environment until you capture them. The fish are kind of the same way here. So if you just jump into the water and sort of dash around the fish, they'll start swimming away from you naturally. So I can't catch it this way. I also can't just cast my fishing rod in there because I don't have a lure. Even though there's like a little bobber at the end of my rod, it's not good enough. So conveniently behind you, there are these trees that spawn infinite amounts of these fishing lures. Let's see what this sign says again. The waste will rarely provide, but the tools to survive do sometimes grow on trees, even if they smell awful. I guess in this game's world, the fishing lures are considered waste. I mean, they look metallic. They've got like a weird eye symbol on them, which is interesting. They actually look very like something out of Rayman 2. Again, there's a lot of Rayman 2 in this game. So maybe this is like metal sort of pollution that they use to catch the fish in the environment. That's my kind of take on it, but I'm not, who knows? There's no really story trailer yet for this game. There's not a whole lot of lore that's been described or discussed. But so you have these lures, and you can kind of cast them anywhere. You don't even have to like toss them in the water. You can put them on the ground and kind of run around with them, and they bounce around the environment, which is really cool. You can even drag them around. You can also disconnect from the lure, and this kind of comes into play in later parts of the demo, where you have to kind of toss the lure onto platforms that are kind of far away from you and kind of disconnect, and then platform around to grab the lure where you placed it, because you're sort of climbing and grapple options are limited. You obviously can't use the grapple hookshot points when you have a lure on your back or on your rod. So that is a really interesting sort of wrinkle on the traversal and collecting objectives. But let's catch this fish. So I'm gonna cast the lure, just hold R1, toss it. Fish will grab it, you hit square to pop it out. Now they'll sort of bounce around until you get close to them, then they grow little tiny legs and start running away. So what's cool about the fish in this game is that they kind of run around the environment where you sort of attempt to capture them, and they take you through the space, which become kind of like their own platforming challenges in and of themselves, which is really interesting. So like if you kind of beeline it to the fish and you pull it out of the water, if it is in the water, they'll take you through the environment, and they'll jump around and make you kind of platform. This is obviously the tutorial space, so it's not super challenging. And they do tire. They'll have like little sweat marks once you kind of chase them for too long, which is your opportunity to capture them. It's really interesting. So let's just capture it this time. So they're pretty hard to hit if they're not sweating. So now it's sweating. Let's hit it. Now, like any good 3D platformer, there's a beautiful collection animation when you get the collectible. Awesome. So I love in 3D platformers when you collect the main collectible. If you look back on Super Mario 64, when Mario gets a star or a power star, they do their little twirl or dance and give the peace sign. In Jak and Daxter, when Jak and Daxter collect a power cell, they do their little unique animations and dances, which is always fun to watch. There was always a different one. And in Banjo Kazooie, for example, when you get the jigsaw piece, the game sort of camera zooms in, and they do their little dance, and Kazooie grabs the jigsaw piece with their beak, and the control is sort of taken away from the player, just to give a nice sort of reward for capturing or collecting the main collectible. So I think the Fling group here totally nailed that sort of sentiment or that idea that 3D platformers have sort of established since I would say Super Mario 64. So whenever you're making a good 3D platformer, make sure if you do have like a primary collectible, that the animation is sweet when you collect the item. All right, let's start going over here. Let's just check in on Bale. So she's kind of telling us that the real challenge is coming up. Let's hit this little lantern, which is your save points, sort of checkpoints. I may have mentioned this at the start of the video, but these are all the slightly more advanced technique tutorial signs. So this talks about like the crouch slide. This sign talks about how you can jump from a crouch slide. So again, I kind of went over these already, but it's cool that they're here. Here's the spin jump. All right, so let's keep going. Got these pots you can break. Again, there's nothing inside any of them. There's little touches here as well, like these pots look like they're kind of floating in the environment. So again, just a little blemish in the demo. I'm sure it'll get fixed in the full release. If you've noticed, there is a day and night cycle in this game. So I'm really curious about how that's going to be implemented and used in the final release. Like, will there be fish you can only find during the nighttime or in the early morning? Maybe they're more difficult or agitated at certain times in the day. I really don't know how the day or night cycle is going to be utilized, but the developers did say in their recent sort of Kickstarter update to kind of let your imagination run wild. So I've been thinking about it. All right, so here we've got what is one of the most utilized techniques in the demo or the game in general, which are wall runs. So wall runs are super prevalent in this game, and they're take a little bit to wrap your head around. So wall running, the tutorial sign says, navigating must become second nature. Riding walls and sliding ledges are effortlessly as one breathes. For success, leap with speed up into and along the wall, not towards it, and then ride as long as you can. Practice makes perfect. So ingrain this, take a screenshot of this picture if you're having trouble with the controls or the sort of platforming challenges in this game. This is the best that they, best way they can describe how this game works, pretty much. So again, you want to kind of build up speed, run into the wall, and then jump kind of at the very end of your wall run. So whether you're jumping or running into the wall and the arc of the run takes you upwards or downwards, just depending on the angle and the position, you want to kind of jump at the end of it. You don't want to jump too soon. So here again, I'm going to run. Just as I was kind of like about to fall to the ground below, I jumped. Again, you've got these automated ledges here, which are super fast and snappy to kind of get around. Here we've got our Rayman 2 textures, vine textures again. I'm actually going to be a little fancy and do a sliding jump into the wall, just to see how that feels. So you can do a variety of techniques to kind of initiate the wall run. All right, so we're almost out of this demo area. So here I want to pick up speed. So more often than not, you want to run into everything in this game. So whether you're running into a wall jump or running into a hook shot line here, again, you've got your full 360-degree movement. I just want to go back and forth, build up some momentum and speed, and then just let go of the R1 button. Okay, so here we have really handy and very appreciated checkpoints. So these fishing rods are shortcuts that you can use if you, by chance, fall and have to redo the whole space again. So if you just jump down, I messed up and missed a jump, Now I've got this nice little shortcut that I can use to get me back up to where I was. Now, I think these are really interesting because if we're looking at the game through a post sort of, Demon Souls or Dark Souls lens, these feel like the ladders that you kick down or like the shortcut, the back doors that you unlock to kind of reduce the run back to get to, bonfire to bonfire. Like that's what these feel like to me in terms of a modern game perspective. But games like Zelda and Metroid and a million other games have been doing sort of shortcut design in their spaces. So it's nothing particularly new, but it's just I thought it was interesting to kind of point out that like at least for me and many people who've have played these Souls games and From Software games as of late at least, this feels very much like within that design ethos. So uh, if you see these fishing rods, beeline to them immediately because they're going to save you a lot of headache in the later parts of the demo. All right, so let's finish the rest of this little tutorial area here. We've got one more wall jump to complete to get out of this spot. Just jump into the wall, grab the ledge. Easy enough. And here we're going to talk to our mentor. I do like how the game sort of utilizes that gibberish style language. Games like Banjo-Kazooie utilize that as well. So we're given this whistle, which allows us to summon the sand shredders in the desert. The sand shredders are basically your mode of transportation. Think of them like your Epona or Epona of the wasteland of sorts. All right, so over here, she runs over to place her basket, and this is where you're going to dump all of your catch. So when you collect the fish and you bring it back to the spot, the fish will automatically kind of pop out above you, and they sort of bounce around this fun little bouncy animation. One critique I have of this actually is that there are multicolored fish in the demo. Who knows how the full game is going to be in terms of what types of fish they're going to be, if they're going to be categorized. I'm assuming they will be. But there's like green and red fish, I believe. And every time you bring them back to the spot and they pop out above you, it's always just a blue fish. So it's just a really minor critique for the demo. We'll see if that's addressed in the final game. But you can kind of run around the spot, and then you hit square and you toss the fish in, and a bunch of coins pop out. Now those larger coins there are worth, I think, 5. And the smaller ones are worth 1, obviously. Fuck the bill again. So from here, you're kind of let loose to tackle, pun intended, all of the sort of ruins and landmarks that are dotted across this open desert. All right, and over here, we're going to have what I like to call a mini Breath of the Wild moment in terms of if we're talking about more recent releases. I think if you grew up playing a lot of the 30 Zelda games like Ocarina of Time for the first time, when you sort of step out of that starting village and you walk out into Hyrule Field and you see all those kind of classic Zelda landscapes like Death Mountain and everything in the background, and the music starts playing, that kind of classic Hyrule Field theme, I think those are some of the best moments in gaming for me personally. And a lot of developers sort of either fail to capture that or don't really capture those kind of moments in their, action adventure games. I think Falcom with the Ease titles do a good job at that sort of like walking into adventure moment where you kind of exit a town and you see like the blue skies ahead of you and you have that incredible field music that plays, and you can see like the shadows being cast from the clouds above onto the ground, and it just sort of swells up this emotion and feeling of adventure. Well, the Filet group, I think, at least in terms of the demo, who knows how this is going to be presented to the player initially in the full game, but for the demo, the purpose of the demo, it's pretty good. So when you call your sand shredder, You can hook your line to them and start surfing around this desert, and this incredible track plays. And it's one of my favorite pieces of music, at least from last year. And I can't wait for the full soundtrack. But the Flag group pretty much captured that moment here in full force. So let's take a look. So you've got this meter that builds up, and you can kind of whip the little minnow friend, and he'll go a little faster. If you time the meter just as it's about to be filled, you get kind of like a gold animation, and you go faster. If I can time it correctly. Here we go. So from here, you can kind of go in any direction that you want to. There's really no abilities or gating in terms of preventing you from exploring any of these spots that you see. It's all kind of based on your skill level. There really is no difficulty meter or indication in terms of how hard or challenging some of these spots are, but there's absolutely a difficulty curve that's sort of undisclosed or hidden. Some of these spots are way easier than others. And there's one sort of, it's the one we're looking at right in the distance here. There's one sort of dungeon-like space that sort of asks the player to apply everything they've learned throughout the game in a really challenging platforming sort of sequence. So we're not going to do all of that for this demo, but we'll get there eventually, just to talk about a few other things in terms of how the game controls and plays. But first, we're going to go to my favorite location in the demo, and it's mainly because of the music. I can't get over the soundtrack in this game. I really can't wait for the full release. So we're almost there. Let's get our little save point here, and then we'll begin. Alright, so here we're in one of the many sort of mini dungeon-like spaces in the tackle box demo. This is probably one of my favorite sort of dungeons in the demo. For one, the music's incredible. I've written a little bit about it, but it's really reminiscent of Kohei Tanaka's work on Alundra for me, especially. Just reminds me of something he would have composed back during the PlayStation 1 era. So the music I'm obsessed with on its own, but the design of this place is really interesting and cool too. So each of the spaces in the tackle box demo has some sort of unique traversal or gameplay gimmick. So this dungeon kind of has, you can see these spinning wheels. So kind of start by using the momentum of the wheel to kind of launch yourself up here. And then you have these little contraptions, which are found in other parts of the demo, but it's very much like the focus, as you can see. They're kind of at every single platform point. You can see one of these. So you cast your reel, and if you kind of hold back on the left analog stick, you can walk in different directions to kind of position yourself to launch in the direction you're facing. So you just kind of hold back and then push forward and let go of the R1 button, and you'll launch to the platform in front of you. If I can do this correctly. Yeah, it's a little tricky. So you have to hit R1, hold back, and then kind of press forward on the left analog stick, and you'll launch yourself. So it's a little bit more advanced than you would expect it. It's not as intuitive as you would think. The same here. You can launch yourself up to those ledges, and it's a little tricky. Okay, so as you're holding R1, holding back on the left analog stick, you actually keep holding the R1 button and then push forward on the left analog stick, and that'll launch you. You actually don't let go of the button, which is interesting. So again, there's really nothing that tells you how to do that, so you have to kind of experiment with the controls. I'm wondering in the full release if they'll tutorialize that a little bit differently. But that's kind of carries through for the rest of this demo. So here, it looks like you could fling yourself to those ledges there, but you actually have to kind of do a wall run into it. So I'm going to fling myself. Let's try this again. I did not hit the shortcut here. So again, every time you see these fishing rod shortcuts, make sure to hit them just in case you fall. Try wall running into this again. There we go. Whew. Yes, it's really asking a lot from a player's perspective. Like, unless you really kind of like beating your head against the wall in terms of positioning and learning the momentum and the mechanics of how everything works. Like, it's not the most inviting 3D platformer. As you can see, these coins are positioned in a way where you have to kind of jump and fall down. You don't have much air control over your character. So once you kind of commit to a fall, you got to make sure you're jumping to where you want to jump. And because we created the shortcut, we don't have to go back and around to the entrance, and we can work our way back up here, which is really cool. It's very thoughtful level design. So I'm not going to collect and do everything here, but I just kind of want to showcase. We'll get one of the fish and just talk about some of the mechanics again. So again, here we just gotta jump into the ledges and pull ourselves up. We're launching ourselves to time ourselves through these rotating wheels. You can kind of position yourself left to right. You can see coins on the right. Let's just try. Whoa! This is even more unsettling and scary. You have to launch yourself into these grapple hooks that are hanging on the wall here. And again, you just tap R1 to cast your reel onto this little hookshot thing, pull back while holding R1 still, and then press forward on the left analog stick. Then you'll launch. And don't press anything else and you'll immediately just grapple onto these grapple points. So from here, you jump to them, you do a wall run. Now, I remember this being really tricky. You have to somehow land or sling yourself to those ledges there, and it's a little tricky. This is something I could see being sort of adjusted in the final game. There we go. Even here, there's like a big secret down there if you drop down from there, but let's just keep going up. So as you can see, the main objective is one of those fish, or there's at least a fish or two here. They're the main collectibles. You can see one over there sort of running around and dancing around, just waiting to be caught, but we got to go through this first. Let's fling ourselves through this. Whoa! It feels real. Once you kind of wrap your head around the controls, it does feel really, really good. And then this will fling us to where the fish is. Whoa! And then again, like I mentioned earlier, they kind of take you through the environment. So even if you didn't explore everything the first time around, the fish sort of kind of take you on a trip through the space that they're in anyway. Where did he go? Got him. Kind of glitching into the hook shot there. Alright, so that's the first major fish in this zone. I believe there's maybe one other one that's a little bit more trickier to get. A little bit more difficult, rather. And again, you can see there's tons of coins scattered around. Honestly, some of the coins are really well positioned and well hidden, so you have to really be thorough and kind of learn the more advanced controls and mechanics to. For this one over there, for example, these kind of larger coins that are worth more, they're really hard to get, and they kind of require full mastery of the controls. So, but this is the Wheel Fling Ruins, whatever you want to call it. I think the YouTube music track called it the Gear Ruins. I guess they have these like rotating gears. I don't know if it's the official name of it, but it's one of my favorite spaces in the demo, at least just in terms of the music kind of carries it for me. So even though these controls are a little unintuitive, once you kind of meet the game at its own terms and you understand how to control and how to utilize these mechanics, it feels just really satisfying and rewarding. So one of my big questions, as I mentioned earlier, is this just an option? Is this going to be an optional space in the full game? Will this sort of ruin be part of a larger dungeon in the main game, part of the story, or is it just an optional sort of playground space where coins are there to collect and fish to capture? That's what's kind of waiting to be seen. I would hope that maybe there's spaces like this in the sort of more open field, open world sort of environment that I'm sure the game's going to have, because the demo clearly sort of indicates that there's going to be big wide open spaces with a lot of sort of landmarks and areas to explore. But I hope a dungeon or a space like this is sort of encapsulated in a main dungeon in like a traditional Zelda sense. So I hope like these sort of platform challenges also have like enemies to kill and maybe keys or other items to collect to unlock gates that lead up to a traditional boss. So again, that might not be their vision for the game, but it's kind of what I want or what I hope from it. Not to say that I didn't enjoy exploring this as kind of like a standalone optional space in the environment, but I hope there's some more context, which I would imagine there will be once the full game releases. So let's go check out one or two other spaces, and we'll talk a little bit more about the game. Alright, just over this hill we have what I call the sort of Bouncy Net Castle, or Bouncing Net Shrine, whatever you want to call it. Here, again, you have to hold the jump button down to utilize these nets, gain some height, and there is our first fish here. So, just like the last dungeon I was showcasing, which had those sort of fling objects that you could sort of fling yourself around with, that seemed to be the focal point of that dungeon. In this place, obviously, you can see everywhere there's nets, so most of the little spaces in this demo have a theme behind them, and I'm just curious, again, how the full game's going to approach the sort of level design and overall area design placement. Will these a space like this with these nets sort of be integrated into a mainline kind of quest dungeon or storyline dungeon, or will there be just like ruins like this sort of scattered in the desert that are pretty much more or less the same way they're designed here? So that's kind of what I'm really curious about. Well, this guy's a little tricky. This little guy just won't give up. Here we go. So satisfying. Can't get over the fish catching animation. It's just one of the best 3D platformer collectibles I think I've ever seen. Alright, so there may be one or two more fish in this area, but we're not going to spend the whole time here. I just kind of want to showcase some of the little dungeon designed areas they made for this tackle box demo. But this is getting up to this top of this mountain can be a little tricky, or this little pillar here. There are only coins up there, I believe. You got to kind of bounce into some wall runs, and then just kind of slowly use these nets. Very carefully bounce from net to net. Just to hold the jump button down. Here I gotta go into the wall run. And from here, I think we just jump all the way down, and it's just gonna blast us all the way up. It's really cool looking. And this is just for 3 of the 696 coins. So be prepared to do things like this elsewhere in this demo. Alright, we're coming up on the grind rail fortress. I gotta come up with better names, I think. So here you've got this whole network of rooted tree bark that sort of serve as grind rails. And look, there's a fish grinding along the path. So we'll go after him first. So as I mentioned, as you can see very clearly here, the fish are sort of taking you around the space that they're in to sort of give you almost like a tour of the environment, which I think is really, really interesting and cool. It's not unlike Ape Escape if we're going to compare it to anything, but it feels a little bit more thoughtful even, or more complicated than just some of the sort of AI pathing that the apes had in Ape Escape. And that one was relatively easy to catch. Now, that was a green fish. I mentioned earlier that when you bring the fish back to the Bale's basket in the sort of tutorial starting area, and you bring the fish out above you and you throw them into the basket, they all turn blue. So even if you're collecting different colored fish, I don't know if they're really technically worth more than other types of fish. I would think in the full game maybe there's going to be fish that are, more rare than others and more difficult to catch than others. I think, from my understanding, or from what I can tell, I could be entirely wrong and I haven't read up enough on it to know whether or not this is the case. But I think like the blue fish are sort of like easy difficulty. The green fish are sort of like medium. And then I believe, if I remember correctly from the last time I played this last year, there are red fish and they're like the most difficult. There is I think it was a golden fish at the very top of that Shadow of the Colossus tower over there. And that one's the sort of ultimate fish to collect in the demo. But it'll be curious to see how they catalog and sort of rank the fish, and if they, some give you different or better rewards depending on which ones you capture. Again, that's all yet to be seen, so... But here we have our Sonic Adventure 2 Ratchet & Clank grind rails. You have to kind of use these tree bark rails to make your way around this space. We're going to jump into this line here. Again, everything's kind of manually driven, so you have to really commit to the jumps you're making as you're going from rail to rail. Whew. That was tricky. Got this beautiful lens flare. Alright, this is a new object we haven't really interacted with yet. If you just cast your fishing rod at this little handle here, you can pull it out. It's like kind of a new platform. You can do a wall run into it. So a lot of this game, when you kind of approach or walk into a new area, it's not really clear like where you're supposed to go. Like when you first kind of circled or came around this corner, it's like, okay, there's an area over there, there's a pole up there, but like to kind of get across, there's like multiple ways you can jump across. I can just kind of wall run to get over here, but I could have also, jumped from here. A little trickier, a little scarier, but this works as well, so. There's not a whole lot of guide posting in this game, for the most part, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But I do wonder if this is sort of an example of how difficult the game's going to be in terms of just progressing in traversal. Just how much of a turnoff that might be for more novice sort of players. So we're going to do a pole swing into this ledge over here. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. I think this screen or just frame of the game is really unintuitive and just kind of confusing in terms of like what they want from you. So you could, I'm actually too scared to try it, although there is a platform below me if I fail. You could jump up. Oh, it doesn't even let you. I thought I could maybe like slide down the wall here and like jump off the wall to the wall up there, kind of do like a wall jump. But what you're supposed to do is kind of like jump into the side of the wall and do like 1 or 2 wall runs to get to the ledge above. There you go. So if something like this was like the way to progress, I could see this being a big turnoff for a lot of players. And I'm super curious, like, is this supposed to be like a hardcore 3D platformer? Do they want it to be approachable? I'm guessing some of the sort of intended design will be pretty fair and easy to sort of fall into, and there should be, or hopefully there's enough content in the game that's like not super difficult, because a lot of this demo is like, it asks a lot from you. And I'm a pretty seasoned action-adventure 3D platformer fan, so there's some things in this demo that even I, when I sort of approached certain challenges and platform sequences, I was like, are you kidding me? Like, do they really want you to do this? Later on in this video, I'll show a sort of demonstration of that, but here we've arrived at sort of the second part of this sort of grind rail tree fortress. You have your little fling orb here, which again was mainly used in the that first gear sort of fling dungeon I demonstrated. You can do like a wall run up here. The quicker you get comfortable with wall runs, the better. And this place has these shortcut fishing rods everywhere because they know how much of a pain this place is. So I think the intended way is to do wall run off of this and jump on this branch here. Again, you gotta be really careful with jumping from grind rail to grind rail. And here's our fish. This one's really tricky because it's not as automated or friendly as like a Ratchet and Clank game. You could easily just like sort of fling yourself off of a grind rail and sort of have to retraverse the space you were just in. I think the fish is right around this corner. You can see the little lock on through the wall. So this is a green little bugger. So this one actually is pretty tough to catch. And just to sort of emphasize and reiterate, I love how these fish take you through the environment. So like even if you didn't explore it thoroughly the first time you sort of came through here, you're gonna see a lot of it just by going after these fish. And this one's really hard to catch. I might not even be able to do it. Where did it go? Oh, felt like I almost had it. That felt really nice. Oh, he's over there. There's something really kind of humorous about the fish, like, they clearly don't want to be captured. This is tricky. I think I have to do a wall run here, and then, oof. Yeah, so if this looks appealing to you, then, download this now on Steam. We've sort of worked our way up to the top of this place. This is tricky, too. I think you need to fling yourself get enough momentum onto this grind rail. Right. Yeah, there he is. I still missed him. This fish is a nightmare. Wonder if there's a shortcut up there that I missed. Oh, there's two of them. Well, I might have to give up on this one. It's two running like on the same path now. Ridiculous. Oh no. And just like that, it's super easy just to fall and completely lose your placement. So that's just a taste of this shrine. It's definitely one of the harder ones. But for the purposes of this video, let's just move on to another location. There's always more fish in the sea, as they say. Alright, over here we've got the lake shrine, which is really challenging. There's a coin up there, up on that tower, that's like impossible to collect. So let's just check out a little bit about this place and talk about kind of what it asks from you. This is like the water ruins level, I guess you could say, with these fun little lily pads. There's tons of treasure and coins down below, but we're not gonna really get those this time around. Let's just get inside this shrine as quickly as we can and collect a few coins along the way. I do wonder what, like, the moon in the background means. Looks like there's, like, some sort of face carved in, and a chunk of it's missing. The lore and world building, and just the story in general is something I'm obviously looking forward to. At the moment, it is a pure gameplay game, and it's all about just the game feel for sure. That's really resonating with me, and the soundtrack. And kind of everything about it. Who am I kidding? So I don't know if these are... I can't get... Oh, so here's a bluefish, which I think are level 1 difficulty. I mentioned earlier. Ooh, whoa! That was like some speedrunner tech. I think I jumped on the fish, and then instantly pressed R1 and square, and I like grabbed it like midair. I'm sure people have already broken this game down for speedrunning purposes, even if it's a demo. I'm not that sort of nutso about it, but I'm crazy enough to make a YouTube video and another blog post about it, so I guess that speaks for something. You can see in the distance over there, that's one of the lure trees, so it's kind of hinting that you'll need a lure to grab some of the fish here. I actually don't remember how you're supposed to get in here. Maybe you do have to go underwater. Lots of coins down here. These are so fun to collect. I just love how they, the sounds they make. The UI for them in the top of the screen is just really satisfying. Oh, looks like you do go underwater and then come up from above. Yeah, this looks like we're getting somewhere. Here we go. One of the enemies. If you think you've lost a coin, they'll come back. So even if an enemy drops their coin kind of in a pit, they'll respawn and they'll have it. I don't think I've ran into any major glitches trying to collect all the coins. So from here you got to do kind of like a water burst jump into that Rayman 2 vine. Can't not collect the coins. I say I don't want to collect the coins again, but you just can't help it. Oh, that's just for the coins here. So where's the... I believe it's right here. So you gotta do a wall jump, I think, here. No, I'm not even seeing the thing I'm jumping on. You just have to kind of trust the game and trust your instincts. I don't know if that was the intentional way, but like if it is, again, totally not handholdy or guide posting whatsoever. This is a hardcore 3D platformer. I either hear fish or enemies. So we haven't found a shortcut fishing rod yet, so this is a little precarious. I'm gonna do a wall run into this to give myself some height for that hook shot point. Once you do wrap your head around the controls, it does feel just so natural and fun to get around. This is a little awkward as well. Ooh, I did not like the way that felt. So where do they want me to go from here? Okay, so wall jump onto this platform. We still don't see a shortcut. I can hear enemies or fish around here. You just got to be extra careful. Here's our Rayman 2 vines. They're always nice. Oh, there's one. Let's just drop down and get that just in case. Whew. There's coins just like everywhere. You gotta search every nook and cranny to collect everything. So be prepared for that if you're gonna go for it. We're just gonna let this guide us to the ledge over there. Nope, didn't work. Thankfully there's no fall damage. I think we're gonna have to pull our way from this direction. But again, I swung from the edge of the pole, like up against the wall, so I could wall run immediately into the grabbing of this ledge. Because if you did a pole swing from the center of that pole, you would just fly right over this platform below. Here we've got more of our little fishing rod poles, these little cupboards. This is like a timed platforming challenge. Maybe it's this one first, I don't remember. Not close enough. We gotta do a wall run? Woo! So uncomfortable. From here... What do they want? Oh, there's a pole over there. God, you can't even see that. So look at that. Like, if you're kind of looking from this position, you can kind of see the end of the pole, but if you move the camera, you can kind of see it. So, definitely a trick of the eye. That would be something I think they would fix in the final game. I can't imagine if this is a dungeon that they leave for the full game, or if it's just as is, that they would leave it like that, because that's a little... I mean, there's a lantern there to kind of... a little fire to you know, kind of track your eye towards that spot, but otherwise it's like, what the fuck's going on here? Alright, so I'm going to talk about this a little further into the video, but this is a perfect example of something I'm going to touch on soon in a dungeon coming up. You would think naturally jumping into this pole like this, you would swing in the center, or maybe swing here, so maybe you hit the side of that ledge there, but you actually have to go to the edge and swing up against the wall, so you launch yourself into a wall run, so you can jump off of it and hopefully either jump into another wall run to give yourself some, like an elevated boost, and then grab the ledge that's kind of up there. So start swinging and just hit jump and hold the left analog stick kind of into the wall. Oof. So I can't describe what happened there, but trust that the game will guide you if you sort of commit to certain wall runs and jumps. You got some enemies over there. Bunch of goodies and coins. I can't imagine the coins won't serve some sort of character progression purpose. If they're just there for the sake of collecting, I'd be really surprised. But hopefully they have a lot planned in terms of the sort of economy in the game. All right, we got some fresh air and the sun's out. There's a coin over here that is so treacherous. I think it's right below there on that platform. You have to do like a spinning jump, I think. Or it's like right below... Actually right below this ledge, I think. But we're not going to do that here. Maybe I'll try to end this portion of the video attempting to get it. But as you can see here, these are new sort of objects and contraptions to sort of interact with. They're like these spinning flower wheels. And if you cast your line, they kind of spin like a fan and they launch you forward. So using these actually, these are purely sort of like momentum speed based. So like the further you kind of get from them and then you press R1, and it's pretty forgiving in terms of like how far away you can be to grapple them, the further you'll kind of be flung. So those take a degree of sort of experimentation to sort of wrap your head around. But they do feel good. That's the coin. That coin's really hard to get up there. Here we've got sort of like a cardinal direction for all of them. So you can kind of just go back and forth freely here without too much worry, as long as you press R1 and one of those blue cursors is on the screen, you'll kind of automatically grab it. But you do have to kind of be positioned in the way you want to be flung, or you're just going to fall. Let's go back up here. We could try to get this coin. It's really unsettling, though. I'll try to do it on the spot. Oh. Woo! There we go. So the only way to get that, I believe, is to do the spin jump. Now, I don't want to traverse the rest of this, so let's just get out of here. We caught a fish, so our day is done. Alright, so this place up ahead in the distance, this is probably like the end game final dungeon if this were the full game. This is a ridiculously challenging sort of tower-like shrine that's, again, completely optional, but for the purposes of the demo, or the tackle box demo, you do have to collect and uncover everything in this space to complete the demo. There's kind of a very Shadow of the Colossus with the garden at the top of the tower. It's sort of like the starting tower from Shadow of the Colossus. At least that's what it reminded me of. But traversing this sort of monster of a dungeon is a whole other conversation. And honestly, this is where the game kind of shows its cards in terms of like what it wants from the player. So we're gonna not do the whole thing, but I'm gonna talk about some aspects of the environment and how the dungeon works. That might come as a surprise to some players for the first time. So right out of the gate, you can't even just walk into it. You have to kind of figure out how to get through the dungeon from the outside. Like the coins bounce around, of course. Not even sure where the other one went. Oh, there. So it kind of hints with this, again, these Rayman 2 moss-like textures. They kind of like lead and funnel the player towards where you're supposed to go. There's something about the poles I want to talk about, but this is not a good spot to discuss it because it doesn't really require it. But most players and most people would jump on one of these sort of, Jak and Daxter, Prince of Persia style poles and just from the center, or from pretty much any position, just kind of twirl around and jump forward. That'll take you to the next pole in front of you. But there's something else with these poles that's not totally clear to the player. Which will come up soon in this dungeon. So from here, you kind of have to do... You can't do like the Ninja Gaiden back and forth wall jump, Metroid sort of style of jump here. So I think you got to kind of... Oop, and I just jumped off completely. Alright, so I'm going to kind of do a run to the wall here. There we go. So yeah, you have to kind of do like... jump into the wall at certain angles and do wall runs into the walls to get onto certain ledges. So we got our friendly vines here, which are the nicest thing about the game. Gotta go underneath. Again, this is just getting into this ruin. Some more enemies. Forget about the coins. We're not concerned about them right now. They're impossible not to collect. Alright. So from here, what do they want me to do again? Yeah, I think they want you to like wall run into this pillar here on the side of this building onto those ledges. And there's kind of a downward slope here, so you have to kind of start running. Ooh, whoa. Yep. Here you want to jump into the wall. Just kind of let the downward arc of your run, your wall run, sort of land or position yourself to where the ledge is, the ledge of that platform that's sort of jutting out there. Your character will automatically grab it. So again, you don't want to jump or anything. You just kind of want to let the walls and the platforms take you and use the momentum. Again, here, I think this is going to require long... And I waited for the kind of the end of that wall run, the downward wall run to jump to the platform here. So this kind of shows you how much time you have before to jump. You don't want to jump too soon when you kind of have that much space in between. And here, I think I'm just gonna do a neutral jump across. I don't think you need a wall run here. Whew, still looks so nerve-wracking. I'm gonna do a wall run here, but again, just let go. Don't press jump or anything, just let go of the left analog stick when you're about to kind of grab the ledge that's in front of you. We're almost inside. Now this is uncomfortable as well, so let's just jump kind of into it. Oh wow, you can... This is so uncomfortable. This is a swinging pole, but you can actually just jump right on top of it. And we're gonna do it that way. Alright, so we're inside. If you jumped into that pole to swing, I think you would have flung yourself maybe to this wall to wall run onto here, or I don't know, but let's not think about that for now. Now we're in. You can see the music actually picks up and it has like an additional layer to the backing track, which is really cool. Let's take care of these enemies. Now we can open the door from the inside. And it's cool. Everything's kind of uses your fishing rod, which is really fun. I'm just going to open these doors, and the game's auto-saving, so we never have to do that again. I'm just going to hit the save checkpoint again, just to illustrate that we can now come through here, and we created a shortcut by opening the door, so we don't have to go through this mess over here again. So that, again, This space, this music's also very Elendra-esque. This is no joke of a dungeon. This is probably the last area you should try to tackle. The other kind of little mini dungeon spaces almost feel like a tutorial. Like everything's utilized here for the most part. I think it has every type of contraption as well. So there's kind of like a understated difficulty curve with the placement of the spaces in this demo. So some of the other landmarks and ruins are a little more on the easier side, and they introduce some of the game's mechanics, but this place is just like, forget about it. Like they kind of expect you to have a good grasp on the controls and how the game operates and what it expects from you. So I would not do this one first, unless you're feeling really sort of feisty. Alright, so the rest of this place, there's something in here I do want to discuss, because I'm curious how in the final game if they're going to address it. But we'll talk about that soon once we get to it. Alright, so let's talk about this place. Here we got to first wall run into these vines. Or is it a different set of vines? Oh, here we go. So here's a pole you can swing on. So again, I'm just going to drop onto it. And we're right at the part where I wanted to explain something that's not super clear to the player. So if you just press X and jump again, do you jump on top of this? Oh, I messed that up. Let's climb back up here. I just want to see how this works exactly, because I don't remember from when I first played it. So again, I'm on the vines, I just press circle to drop down, and you kind of automatically magnet to the tip, sort of tightrope walk on the pole. I think if you press circle again, you start hanging from it? No, okay. So, I don't think there's a way to kind of lower yourself, start swinging when you're on top of a pole. That's not clear to me, and I don't remember exactly. So let's just jump up into this one, and now you're in the walking or the swinging sort of mode of the pole. So this is where I think the game will get in trouble with a lot of people, unless they sort of, again, explain this further or tutorialize it a little bit better. But naturally, I think if you played any other 3D platformer growing up, and you've been sort of conditioned to kind of swing in the middle of a pole to reach the next one, clearly it looks a little far, so that's a little deceiving. So maybe for most players or not, I don't know. You might not think to just jump from the middle. What the game wants you to do is actually go to the ends of poles. So when you swing off of it, you'll automatically be in a wall run because you're up against the wall. And again, like any other jump from a wall run, you kind of want to wait for like the sort of end of the descent of the wall run and then jump to the next pole. So if I remember correctly, that's what it wants us to do here, so let's try it. Yep, so then jump. And because I was going lower, I was flinging upwards into the wall, I arced upwards along the wall and then jumped forward. So again, sort of the positioning and how you jump into the terrain is the kind of depends on or sort of results in whether you're kind of running downward or running upward in the wall. And I think this is where I think is super advanced and unlike a lot of other 3D platformers I've played in a very long time. And here you have to kind of do the same thing. So again, you would think, like, oh, is there a pole right above me? Like, does it want me to do like a sort of wall jump? Fling forward, press X off the wall and jump to like a pole above me? Or that's clearly, there's no pole above me, so that's clearly not what they want you to do. So here, they want you to, again, very sort of unnaturally align yourself into the side of the pole or up against a wall, and then wall run in front of me when I let go of the swing, and then but also jump. So I jump towards the wall that's straight ahead of me, and I continue to the wall run into the next pole up there. So maybe describing it is more complicated than it is, but it's definitely not obvious, and it's a little unintuitive in terms of most games have conditioned you to kind of swing from the center or swing from, you know, the middle of a bar into the bar that's in front of you. But this game kind of, the way it's designed, takes it to like a whole nother level. And I think it's kind of cool, but I also wonder if there's a way to sort of teach this to players in a better fashion, or is that their intention, is to kind of say like, hey, screw you, figure this out. This is how we want you to play your game. This is how it's designed. And then go from there. So let's just see if we can do this. Oh, whoa! Yes, it's a lot of trial and error. So I could see a lot of people, and thankfully the levels are mostly designed in a way where there's shortcuts to bring you back up. But sometimes you do have to do like a big part of the platforming again just to kind of get back to where you're at. And this level especially is sort of designed that way. All right, so ooh. So that's hard to explain what happened there. I launched myself up against the wall, into the wall that the pole was connected to. I jumped kind of at the apex of the wall run into the wall that I'm attached to now, but kind of let the controls take it, and sort of the slope of the terrain of the wall sort of like guide me to the pole here. I don't know if I would have had to have jumped. I did jump there to grab this pole, but it was like, it was so fast and so quick I couldn't tell you at what position I jumped. So for again here, like, oh, that pole's really far away. Like, this is not going to cut it, obviously. You don't have a double jump. So you got to use the wall run. So you got to position yourself up against the wall again. And I'm just going to jump once off this pole, and then just without touching anything, just let the wall guide me to the next pole. I did jump once right at the end there, because it didn't look like I was going to make it. But that's kind of how this game operates. I swear you can... Oh, so here you have to jump on the wall and then jump back to land on the top so you can tightrope the pole. I think, right? Maybe not. Alright, let's try... This is a really weird angle, but... Okay, so there, that was really tricky. You kind of have to, like, the camera position, I think, matters a lot, too. So here we're going to do another one of those, just swing right into the wall, and let the wall guide you without touching anything, and then jump right at the end, maybe once you're kind of positioned in front of the bar. There we go. Now, same here. Just to be safe, this one looks like it's short enough to just jump straight across from the middle of the bar. Let's just do a wall run into it. So we're just gonna jump to the left and kind of let our character arc downwards onto the vines. We could really use a shortcut right about now, the friendly developers. Hopefully one's coming up soon. Whew, that did not feel comfortable. Here I think you have to wall run and then just fall straight down that pillar that's in front of us, and then grab the ledge that's right below or right on top of the vines there. So I'm gonna wall run and just let my character kind of fall. and they immediately grab it. The same deal here. I'm gonna wall run. This is so advanced and not like hand-holdy at all. Like this place really expects a lot. So I really wonder how difficult the full game's going to be, or if this is like an indication of like some of the more harder optional challenges in the game. But if this is sort of required in order to progress sort of platforming, I do wonder how they're going to balance that in terms of like, is this going to be a game for hardcore players, or is it going to be approachable? Is there going to be like assisted accessibility options and modes? Like I really, really wonder. I think it's awesome. Okay, so there I did not jump. So I wall ran up against the wall and let the arc downward run sort of like guide me, take me to this platform. So I didn't touch anything other than holding the left analog stick the whole time. And here we go. Here's your lovely, very, very welcoming and very much needed shortcut, so we don't have to do this disaster of a platforming sequence ever again. All right, so in conclusion, I just kind of want to talk about how this game is going to sort of stand up against its peers in the sort of 3D platformer indie space. You've had a lot of games kind of come out over the past 5 to 10 years that have sort of graduated from 2D action adventure games to games that are more reminiscent of the types of experiences you would see kind of like in the late PS1 era, early PS2, GameCube, and Xbox sort of generation. So you had games like A Hat in Time, which was a more traditional 3D platformer with a pretty basic move set. It had like a dive that felt pretty good. You can jump on things and bounce pretty high at times, and you had a few gadgets like a hook shot and such. But the design of that game was very much in the Mario 64 Sunshine and Galaxy approach, where you kind of had a world where you selected an objective, you go into the world, and the stage would kind of be designed around that objective. You'd collect the item, then you kind of get booted out, and you'd go back in and kind of do the same thing with a different sort of setup. Then you had games like Demon Turf, which the developer has sort of since described their games, or that game, as like an expressive 3D platformer. They have a new game coming out called Demon Tides, which is sort of like the second or third game in the series now. But that game it follows The Big Catch a little bit more closely in terms of a more advanced move set. There was a lot of like wall running and wall jumps and kick jumps. You could do cartwheels in that game and double jumps and transform into certain transformations that allowed you to kind of like hover and float. And it was very sort of, again, kind of going into linear levels that had a few nooks and crannies for secrets, but it was kind of in and out sort of linear stage progression with a lot of obstacle course like design. Tinykin, again, is arguably a 3D platformer, but it has some light Pikmin elements. It was kind of doing its own thing, but that game kind of took place in an interconnected space. It was like a huge house, I believe. And it had sort of that like Metroid Zelda design where you can unlock shortcuts and areas would wrap around with each other. And similarly, on the kind of more niche end of things, there was a game called Pseudo Regalia, which is a really cool sort of low poly PS1 inspired 3D platformer that had a pretty complicated moveset or more advanced control scheme, very non-linear. Again, it was sort of an interconnected sort of Metroid-like space where you gained new abilities like slides and all sorts of things that allowed you to kind of reach previously inaccessible areas. So that game was kind of doing its own thing too. And of course you have Yooka-Laylee, which is former Rare developers, the Banjo-Kazooie creators. It was sort of a spiritual successor to the Banjo-Kazooie series. The original release was sort of divisive and a little rough. They made a 2D sequel, The Impossible Lair, eventually, but and they're also remaking the original Yooka-Laylee, Yooka-Replay-Lee, which comes out, I believe, this year, or hopefully soon. But that game, again, kind of was an extension of Banjo-Kazooie, so it had like a hub world, and the hub world connected to individual sort of stages, and then you could kind of tackle objectives and collect things kind of at your own leisure. But the one game I think that really resonated with me, but it's a totally different kind of 3D platformer. I think it's like the best indie 3D platformer we've had over the past couple of years, and that is Evening Star Studios' Penny's Big Breakaway. It was one of my favorite games from last year. That game is sort of it's from the Sonic Mania developers, so it has the stages are very linear, more score and flow-based than other platformers. The main character had a yo-yo, and you could kind of ride on it and perform tricks. And the whole point of the playing the game or getting through the stages is to kind of like link your moves together as quickly and as efficiently as kind of as stylistically as you could. But again, that game had some collectible elements within the stages and some bonus objectives. But that was a very linear stage-by-stage 3D platformer. But before I kind of talk about what I want from the game a little bit more, you have your AAA games as well. Team Asobi completely nailed it and killed it with Astrobot last year. It was one of my top 3 favorite games of 2024. That game is a kind of a traditional 3D platformer. Again, very Super Mario Galaxy-like in terms of going into a level from a map, and then it's kind of its own contained space with collectibles and platforming challenges and the sort. But that game's moveset as well is pretty simple. There's nothing particularly, I would say, interesting about the way Astrobot controls or plays even, but it's the DualSense haptic feedbacks and the triggers on the controller and just all of the things that the DualSense sort of provides. What elevates that game to kind of its own sort of level of greatness. So that game's kind of doing its own thing, and I'm thrilled that it exists, and I hope they continue to make either just more 3D platformers or more Astrobot games in general. Insomniac, still, it's yet to be seen if they're going to make another Ratchet & Clank game. I can't imagine there won't be one, but Ratchet & Clank hasn't changed since pretty much the PS2 era outside of visuals and performance and all that kind of stuff. They're more or less structured the same way. You're just planet hopping, it's third-person shooting with light platforming elements, and that series has sort of has stayed rooted in its legacy more than a lot of other 3D platformers from that era, like Jak and Daxter and Sly Cooper, which are long gone, and they kind of evolved into their own thing over time. And then you've got the heavy hitter from Nintendo, like the big elephant in the room is what's next for mainline 3D Mario. Is it going to be, as simple as Odyssey 2? There was a lot of really cool sort of framework in that game with the hat mechanics, where you can toss your hat and do like long jumps into triple jumps with the hat, and the transformations and everything. And but again, that game was pretty structured in a sense where you had like a menu that you utilized to go from level to level, and they were just kind of these bite-sized semi-open world spaces, kind of like the desert here, with some objectives or non-linear objectives to get all the moons that you could collect in that game. And then they did Bowser's Fury, which was even more sort of open-ended and mini open world or open zone, whatever you want to call it. And that game, it was based on kind of the Super Mario 3D formula. But is that what's the future of Mario? Is it just going to be Odyssey 2 or something completely new? Who knows? But in terms of the AAA space, Mario will clearly kind of set the benchmark when it comes out on Switch 2. So until then, you've got games like The Big Catch, which is certainly pulling inspiration from a lot of older games I grew up playing, but it also feels fresh and new. I may have mentioned this twice already, but I do hope the levels in this demo are integrated into traditional 3D Zelda-like spaces with lock and key progression, mini-bosses and the sort. That may not be the Filet Group's vision for the game, but it's kind of what I want it to be. The closer this game is to traditional 3D Zelda, the better I feel. I think the Tackle Box demo is a good representation of how the game will control and play, but I hope the final release has more context and traditional game structure, at least in terms of pacing. I think character progression, inventory management, and menu navigation are the big questions I have for the final release. Will there be a variety of fishing rods to collect and upgrade? Are the lures and bobbers customizable as well? Perhaps you'll obtain a spiked bobber that can be cast at enemies to deal more damage. Maybe the fishing line can be used to hook enemies and reel them in. Will the menu be presented as a titular tackle box where all of his equipment and lures are stored? Perhaps the developers will utilize a Resident Evil 4-like briefcase for the menu, where you need to upgrade or find larger tackle boxes to hold more gear. I do hope there's a nice menu where all of your collected fish are categorized and listed at the very least, although they added a compass-like feature to the demo after the fact, which points in the direction of fish you haven't captured and will flash red when near uncollected coins. It would be nice if there's an in-game map that shows fractions or percentages based on the amounts of coins and fish you collected in each area. There are so many ideas and approaches the developers can take when it comes to character progression, inventory management, and menu navigation. The demo is clearly more focused on precision 3D platforming, character movement, and collecting things, however. I do think the Big Catch feels positioned for success, but that's depending on a few things. I think the developers need to balance the game's difficulty and make it a bit more approachable while somehow maintaining their vision for what clearly appears to be a relatively hardcore and unforgiving 3D platformer. The game already feels like a dream to control, but I do think some of the more advanced techniques need to be tutorialized a bit better. The pathing through some of the environments could use some additional guideposting, but that might be intended design. The Big Catch feels like it's carving a very particular niche while simultaneously filling a void that Nintendo has arguably removed themselves from, at least in terms of traditional 3D Zelda-like games. I'm guessing the Filet Group is waiting for the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct in April before they show or announce anything else. This game feels like prime real estate for the Nintendo audience, though. Just as long as they don't launch the game a week before Grand Theft Auto 6 is released, I think they will be okay. So that's it for me. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe and all that good stuff. I'm also writing a blog post, which will be linked in the description of the video. If you care to give that a read, I would also appreciate it. So until next time, bye forever.